Welcome to Cats and Rats Podcast, covering your Florida Panthers.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of the Cats and Rats Podcast, episode 41. I'm your host, Kirby Lupo, joined alongside my co-host, Cody Stevens and Nick Levine. Before we welcome our special guest here today, I just want to thank everyone for joining us on our live streams this past week. The Seth Jones trade live stream is almost nearly at 1K views, so I appreciate everyone there for our biggest video to date here. But we want to get a Chicago Blackhawks perspective here today, gentlemen. So we're going to welcome in here the lead Blackhawks writer for BleacherNation, columnist of the Fourth Period, member of the PHWA, and author, Tab Bamford. How's it going, Tab?
I'm getting there. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. I just wanted to start with you today. Did you get any indications, like some of our kind of sources in media, that there was something brewing with the Panthers here this week, and maybe potentially a big name player coming over to the Panthers, even before we heard the Seth Jones stuff? Was there anything that you were hearing on that front other than like what Seth Jones said of coming out and kind of publicly asking for a trade? Did you see anything here, even involving the Panthers or other teams?
Well, the Panthers have pretty consistently had scouts at the United Center watching the Blackhawks since probably the middle of December. So when you see the same teams having different people, and I think that's kind of the big tell, is when teams are sending out different scouts to watch teams in the same building. Generally, it means that they're interested in something. And I think when Seth Jones talked about wanting to go somewhere that he could win consistently and get in the playoffs and kind of know that he's going for it this year, that kind of diminished the list. And, there have been reports in Chicago that really the only two places that he would have accepted a trade were Florida and Dallas. And Dallas really kind of wasn't interested. So that kind of left you with Florida. But when you start tying all the loose ends together, it makes a ton of sense. I think the Panthers, not knowing necessarily what the future is with Aaron Ekblad on the right side of the blue line, that's an enormous deal. I don't think that this would exclude them from retaining him beyond this season, but it certainly helps, have an option. And then just Bill Zito being familiar with Seth Jones from their time that overlapped in Columbus. Obviously, he liked the player there. So behind the scouting and them, coming up with enough cap space somehow to figure it out before putting Matthew Tkachuk on LTIR, it makes sense. And look, they've been bold the last two deadlines, and it's paid off for them to go to the Stanley Cup final twice in a row. So bringing in a fresh body that's hungry is a really good way to kind of stave off that we're going through it again mindset. If you run it back with the same same roster 3 times in a row, those guys are going to get tired. But if you've got a guy like Seth Jones that's desperate for it, you might get a little extra energy in the room from a guy like that.
Cody, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, like you told us before, you've covered the Blackhawks for quite a bit here, and it seems like ever since the Seth Jones trade in I believe it was 2021, it seemed like him and the Blackhawks was just a match made in hell. I don't think there was any point, even when the deal was made, and because you guys gave up Adam Boqvist, who at the time was a really highly touted defensive prospect, and then a first round pick, and then you guys signed Seth Jones to the
2 firsts.
Was it 2 first?
Oh yeah. The deal was Adam Boqvist, first in 21 that became Cole Sillinger, the first in 22 that became David Jurasek, the 6th overall pick, a little salt in the wound there, and a second round pick in 2021 that Columbus actually flipped, I believe, for Jake Bean at that draft. For Seth Jones, they moved back to the last overall pick in the 2021 draft and a 6th round pick in 2022.
That's
and then immediately gave Jones an 8-year extension at $9.5 million per, which made him at the time, I think the second or third highest paid defenseman in the National Hockey League.
That's low-key a lose-lose trade.
With a full no move clause. I think I forgot that part too.
Yeah, but that
Some
was
teams handles it like candy.
But that was
that is literally if there is a trophy for the Stan Bowman special, that's it.
Yeah, and what's funny is that was the summer where the defense market became unbearable because that's when Darnell Nurse signed his extension and Seth Jones got that extension.
And Dougie Hamilton.
Oh yeah.
and who set the market at $9 million? Stan Bowman and Seth Jones.
Yep.
But you're welcome, folks.
But I think what Stan Bowman was envisioning at the time of that deal was Patrick Kane was getting towards the end, and I think Taves was pretty much done by then. If he was in and out more out of the lineup with injuries at the time. Yeah, Duncan Keith on his last legs before. Wait, no, that was the year before. Wait, no, was that year? I think it was that off season.
Yeah, so when they got, so
I think it was because Keith played for Edmonton.
The 30-second context on that summer was a year or two before Stan Bowman told everybody that he was going to rebuild, and they had a terrible season, and they actually won the lottery, moved up to 3rd overall, and took Kirby Dach.
Yeah, I remember. I remember Kirby Dach.
Yeah, there you go.
My uncle knows his family really well.
And you know what? I will say this: his younger brother is. He was dropped into a brutal situation in Chicago because he was drafted, and Kirby was in the room with him when he got drafted, and it was awesome. And you got all these visions of the brothers coming and playing together, and then Kirby got traded right before Colton came to his first training camp, and the poor kid had to answer nothing but questions about his brother getting traded. And you know what? Colton he's on the Blackhawks NHL roster right now. He's playing legit bona fide power forward hockey in the National Hockey League right now. He's a thumper. And so God bless the kid. Kirby we'll have a whole other 30 minutes to talk about Kirby Dach's development here because that was butchered. So they draft Kirby Dach. They've got Jesper Boqvist from the year before. And then Stan Bowman gets a boatload of cap space for the first time in his life as general manager. And so even though he said he was going to rebuild, he decided to go the spend like a drunken sailor route and go get a whole bunch of stuff. No matter if there was going to be any chemistry at all or any of it was going to work, I'm just going to go get a bunch of guys. So he goes out and gets Seth Jones and gives him the bag. He convinces Marc-Andre Fleury to waive his no trade clause out of Vegas and come here. He signed Jake McCabe that summer.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they're like, okay, we're back in. We're back in. Problem, Jeremy Colton was the head coach, and that was an all-time debacle. Just Alpo Suhonen level, just absolute dumpster fire. Yeah. If you know who Alpo Suhonen is, it sounds like dog food. It coached like dog food. Anyway, that's an OG reference for Blackhawks folks, and many of whom will be triggered. So between Colton and just the fact that the pieces didn't fit together, and you're right, Cody, Jonathan Taves was working through some long COVID stuff at that point. Brent Seabrook was kind of at the end. He ended up, his rights got traded to Tampa as an LTI consideration. But he ended up, I think, having both hips and at least one, if not both shoulders, all redone. So he was like, I'm out. So you went from convincing future Hall of Famer Marc-Andre Fleury to join future Hall of Famers Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, Jonathan Taves, Patrick Kane. And then you tell Seth Jones, hey, 8 years, you're going to play with these guys, and then you're going to be the face of the franchise. And then just complete dumpster fire implosion. And 2 years later, he's left with a team that's putting up 54, 55 points, and no one is left from the future Hall of Fame category. So, I totally get why he was frustrated. I think that there is a case to be made that there were elements of his game that didn't necessarily help the team's success and could have been better. But at the same time, he rightfully told you guys in Florida at that intro press conference that, I don't think he would have signed an 8-year contract if he knew that he was going to the top of the lottery for the next 5 years.
Yeah, Nick. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. I actually was at a lot of that 56-game season, the shortened season, where we saw the Blackhawks a ton, right? And I remember at the beginning of that year, they were absolutely brutal. They were trying to be one of the worst teams, not just in the league, but they were putting up historically bad numbers at the beginning of the year. And I think that kind of like later stretch, I don't know if you guys obviously remember, I'm sure.
They were in it for a little bit.
They were in
there.
it. You were making like a playoff push there at the end. So I think maybe that kind of.
Well, what happened was Jeremy Colton said, screw whatever Joel Quenneville did that worked for 10 years. I'm going to do it my way. And all the guys that played for Quenneville and won for Quenneville were like, but this works with who we are. And it was like, yeah, but I'm smarter than you. And they were like, okay.
Yeah. And
especially when Jeremy Colton played midget in Canada with Brent Seabrook. Like, dude knows you since you were 6. Shut up.
Are you putting this like Dallas Aikens level with Edmonton?
Yeah, like it full-blown borderline revolt. And like Jeremy Colton may end up being a really good head coach in the National Hockey League. This was just a confluence of awful in Chicago with, Stan Bowman was desperate. He was trying to figure out a way to salvage something before the end of Kane and Taves because he knew Keith was going. Seabrook got a terrible contract when his body started to fail him, and that hurt them from a cap perspective. Bowman didn't draft well for 5 years. He made terrible trades, like Thomas Fleischman for Philip Deneau when he was like 20 years old. That was awesome.
Forgot Deneau was a Blackhawk. And then Panarin for Saad.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that I get that because they had really bad paper on the books, and they knew that Panarin was only going to play in Chicago or New York, and he wanted $10 million on his next deal, and they couldn't afford $10 million. So they went and got a known commodity, knowing that Marian Hossa might not play forever, and Brandon Saad might be the next Marian Hossa, which Panarin went on to be a 100-point guy, and Brandon Saad, God bless him, was not Marian Hossa, and there you go. But then you have Alex DeBrincat come in a year later, and he's basically what Panarin was with Kane, and now they're both in Detroit hanging out, and their kids are best friends. So, like just that entire timeline for the Chicago Blackhawks was just a hot mess of transition and everything going wrong, that Jones just kind of got dropped in thinking that he was going to spend like the 7 best years of his career in a great situation in a great city. And pretty much immediately everything went to hell. And I think they got him in 21, and it was March 1st of 2022 that Colton got fired on the 3rd anniversary of Quenneville getting fired, ironically enough. And March 1st was the 3rd anniversary of Kyle Davidson being named the permanent GM. So literally like a month into the season, you had the Kyle Beach report come out. Bowman got fired. And then Davidson came in and sold the reality that they needed to burn it down. And then he started trading, and Brandon Hagel's gone. Marc-Andre Fleury's gone. And then over the summer, Doc goes, DeBrincat goes, and you're replacing them with nothing. You're replacing them with Peter Mrazek. Love him, not Marc-Andre Fleury. You can look at their numbers, and maybe at this stage in their life cycle, fairly comparable at times, but Marc-Andre Fleury is Marc-Andre Fleury, and Peter Mrazek is Peter Mrazek. And you're a bunch of picks, and Kevin Korchinski wasn't going to do anything for the Blackhawks at that point. Frank Nazar wasn't going to do anything for the Blackhawks at that point. And 3 years later, we're starting to see some of the benefit of those deals, but at the time, Seth Jones did not sign up for that. And so I can appreciate his frustration that he came here trying to rekindle a dynasty, thinking that they were going to be able to find that like 7 years later that Sidney Crosby had in Pittsburgh. And it went the opposite direction.
Yeah. We've been there as Panther fans a lot as well. What's kind of like your expectations of Seth Jones? You might not see the Eastern Conference a lot, the Panthers a lot, maybe not know their system, which I want to get into here in a second. But what should just the general expectations of fans be here with Seth Jones?
Well, I'm interested to see how they use him, because like you guys have got a really good system down there in Florida. You've got some really good established players. I think losing Montour was huge. I don't think Seth Jones is going to in any way, shape, or form he's not going to be what Florida lost in free agency last summer. He's a different player. He's a different guy. So is he going to be your first power play quarterback? Is he going to be your second power play quarterback? Is he going to focus on the penalty kill? I think if you dial him back from the 25 minutes a night he was giving in Chicago to 19 to 20, theoretically you get a more consistent effort shift to shift, because you're getting 20% less ice time, and you're getting more favorable matchups than having to go up against the other team's top line every single shift in theory. So I think after, one game, I think it'll take some time for them to figure out kind of how to suit him and who's going to work best with him on the left side, and for him to get comfortable down there. But I think if you dial in at that like 19 to 20 minutes and figure out how you're using him on special teams, I think he can be a very capable guy who moves the puck pretty well. I hope that you don't expect him to set any like land speed records skating.
Nah.
I coined the phrase the Seth Jones passes to nowhere program, so I will advise that there will be grenades distributed frequently as
Cody
trying
calls
to get
them-
out of the zone.
The
Cody
good old
calls
pizzas. Like,
Oh no, not the pizza.
it's funny. It's like, because as this recording, both Spencer and I and Seth Jones have played their first game with their respective new teams. And it's already funny. Nick can vouch for me on this. Seth Jones is already our best passing D-man.
Yeah. I mean, and I was thinking coming into our team, like you put him next to a guy with Nico Mikkola, right? Like, I think we're going to use him a little bit differently that you guys used him. Obviously, number one, just the role that he plays.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's not being relied on as much, but it's a certain system things, and you could see like he was playing 4-on-4. He was kind of doing running into a bunch of different situations against Tampa. He didn't really know what he was doing. He's like looking around. Like there was this 4-on-4. He's like, I have no clue what to do, right? Because it's just such a different system.
It's all right. He did that for a lot of the time here.
No, I mean,
I
did want to ask you.
I saw with the Hawks system and the Panthers system, they both run a 1-2-2 neutral zone. But Cody, you know what's dependent on our forwards of coming back and back checking and things like that. It's going to be totally different. What's coming back to help him?
I did want to ask you this question. What was kind of the sense? Obviously, more than likely, there was a greater chance that Seth Jones was going to get traded. What were Blackhawk fans, feeling about, what the return could potentially be? I'm sure you were just as shocked at the return as probably a lot of Panther fans were. What were you kind of expecting? And then what was your reaction once the return actually came in?
I think, because of the way that many Blackhawks fans, for right or wrong, associate Seth Jones and his contract with the demise of the dynasty era, which they shouldn't. It's not his fault. But because his Q rating in Chicago was never very high. And part of that is he was not like, the bright smiley face all the time. And part of it was that, bluntly, Blackhawks fans were spoiled. For 10 years, we watched Duncan Keith, Brent Seabrook, and Nicholas Hjalmarsson, two Hall of Famers and arguably the best defensive defenseman in the National Hockey League. And so being the guy that follows that, good blank in luck, right? So, there were fans that were, tongue-in-cheek saying, I'll be happy if we have to only eat $7 million of the $9.5 and we get a bag of pucks back. I think the reality is that a 30-year-old 6'4" defenseman that can play 25 minutes a night, who I'll keep saying it, shoots right-handed, that has value. If his skills have diminished a bit, it still has value. He's a better player than he showed in Chicago, than the numbers probably indicate in Chicago. I joke about him looking around, not knowing what to do. Most of that was because he was looking around wondering where the hell his teammates were a lot of the time. Or who the hell was on the ice with him. Last year when you've got like Jared Tenorti and Jacob Megna being a third of your blue line, yeah, that's what happens when you're a guy that, has finished in the top 5 for the Norris before.
TJ Brody, I don't like.
That's the new guy that gets everybody's attention here.
I like Connor Murphy. That's a guy.
Connor Murphy, we've all are fans.
Connor Murphy's a stud. He's a great dude. He's a leader. You can tell that he's a second-generation NHL player. He's a heart and soul guy. So all love for Connor Murphy. But like with Seth, I figured that they'd probably have to eat about $3 million. And I was thinking either they would have to sweeten it with somebody like Lucas Reichel to get a first-round pick, or they would get maybe a package of a couple twos, or they would package some of their 35 second-round picks in the next 4 years to get a late one somewhere or something like that. And I figured that they would probably get some type of salary with term back to make it work, especially when it became a send me to a contender moment. Like, no contenders got 9.5. Most contenders don't have 6. So you're going to have to take some money back in the deal. Just looking at Florida's situation and some of the, especially knowing that Tkachuk was going to miss some time, I did start to wonder if Spencer Knight was going to be long for Florida just because of the cap number and with all the other guys that they're paying right now. In no way, shape, or form in a million years did I expect Spencer Knight for Seth Jones. Throw a first-round pick on top of Spencer Knight, and I literally went and bought a Powerball ticket on the way home.
Because I think
that happened.
I think the thought here was like, Tkachuk, he did end up going on OTR, or he wasn't at the time of the trade. It's like, in all of our minds, when we're taking a look, we were looking at other guys like Erik Karlsson as well as Seth Jones. High cap hits, like you said. It's like, we're thinking we probably get this dude without getting rid of anybody off the roster, right? So the fact that, and again, the Knight Bobrovsky tandem has been kind of a contentious subject in terms of we're paying almost $15 million for 2 goaltenders, right? So that's always been kind of a talking point among Panther fans, right?
I mean, it's wild that like 2 years ago, the talking point was salary dump Bob.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And now he's a part of our ring.
And you're like, we can stomach 10-5 for 2 more years. That's cool.
Like it's gone to the point where now when Bob retires, it's gonna be people are gonna think of Sergei Bobrovsky like, oh, that Panthers goalie. Like it's not gonna be. It's gonna be like him. Like people remember him as a Blue Jacket, but the first image is always gonna be him with the cup and a Panther jersey.
Right. It's gonna be like Roberto Luongo being a Canuck.
Yeah. And Kirby hates.
Well, I'm gonna add with Luongo, Vancouver Canuck, Florida Panther, and member of Team Canada. But I digress.
Yes. But that's like, Bobrovsky being remembered as a Panther. Like, the dude had some really good runs other places. Like,
oh yeah, Columbus.
I'm totally with you. Like, Luongo for me is Panther first, Canuck second. But I think on the macro to hockey fans, because of what they did in Vancouver, that's where by and large he's remembered, especially being when you put the Canadian national team and him being on that team in the Olympics, kind of solidified it for him. But yeah, I mean, Spencer Knight, I think there's been a little bit of an enigmatic thing around him with last year, and then the way that he just seemed like he came in this year, and he's kind of been on a heater for, you guys tell me, like 2 months.
Yeah, around the turn of the year was when he turned it on, because at the start of the year it was kind of rough getting back into NHL play.
He wasn't getting as many starts as you thought, Cody, and then he stopped getting protected starts here in the new year. And then teams like New Jersey, right, Carolina.
Yeah, and the one thing I think you as Blackhawks fans are going to expect with Spencer Knight, or like I have to understand with Spencer Knight with Panthers, is that player assistance program stint really screwed the entire development up, because at the time Bob wasn't playing that well that year. We barely snuck in, and he was getting a bulk of the starts, and
Knight was actually being talked about taking over the starting job at one point. There was a time he did in December.
You know what's funny? What I just realized, the last game he went into the player assistance program was at Nashville. His last game as a Panther was at Nashville. So that's just always been something. But the overpay with the trade is like one thing about Bill Zito. If he likes a guy, he will overpay for him in a trade. Mm-hmm. You've seen it with Matthew Tkachuk. You've seen it with Claude Giroux. You've seen it with Ben Sherratt. Those are 3 different instances. And
maybe not the Claude Giroux one as much, but the other 2, yes.
Yeah, Owen Tippett wasn't going to develop here for because we tried him everywhere, with everyone. Yeah, it never worked. It wasn't
going to be on the top line.
It was not going to work here. Spencer Knight's a different story, but I understand why this trade happened, because if you look at it, Chicago had nothing in the pipeline for goalie, at least for the future, because Soderblom has been.
But they're high on him. I think they might be high on him.
So this is where things get really fascinating in Chicago. You came in at the end of last year. Most Chicago Blackhawks fans said Arvid Soderblom would be back in Europe at the end of the season when he's a restricted free agent. Failing to appreciate or recognize that he had played like 70 AHL games in 2 years, and that was the extent of his North American experience. And he was brought in and dumped in back of Peter Mrazek, who has his health moments. And he really struggled behind a terrible defensive team. Again, this is a team that's rolling out a 19-year-old Kevin Korchinski with Jacob Megna, who was healthy scratched for 45 games by a non-playoff Seattle team and then claimed off waivers because 3 defensemen got injured in the same weekend. And Jared Tenorti, who was also waiver claimed the year before from the Rangers. So you literally had 3 waiver claims and a 19-year-old with Seth Jones and occasionally Connor Murphy on the back end for the second half of the season.
Lord, no wonder why he didn't pan out.
Right. So Soderblom struggled. The players always defended him. He went to work this summer. The Blackhawks go out and signed Laurent Brossoit to split duties with Peter Mrazek. And it's like, okay, I'm interested. Like, dude's one of the better backups in the league. Let's see how this plays out. And then they named Drew Comesso, who played for the U.S. in the Olympics, had a really nice run at Boston University. He's a second-year pro this year. They named him the starter in the AHL like the first week of September. So Soderblom went from literally playing like 40-something games in the NHL last year to being 4th on the depth chart. Brossoit hurts his knee training for the regular season.
He's always hurt.
The front office in Chicago painfully, intentionally, to the anxiety-driving, bald spot-inducing pain of some fans, have remained consistently committed to developing over-marinating prospects in the minors and waiting until they're ready. So they didn't want to rush Comesso. So Soderblom, we're thinking, he'll come up and give him like the first week and a half of the regular season. Maybe he's got to start 1 or 2 games, and then he can go to wherever he's going to go. And he comes out and he looks decent in his first start. And then Brossoit is nowhere to be found. And fast forward to whatever today is, March 4th. And Soderblom's got a .907 save percentage, and he's been probably one of the 3 or 4 best Blackhawks this year. And certainly the best story. I think he and Ryan Donato are the best stories on the Blackhawks right now, because the kid was, again, he was this close to being banished back to Europe. And now there's a legit conversation about, like, do they extend him and buy out one or both of Brossoit Mrazek this summer?
Mrazek's gone out from all my research I was doing coming into this.
Yeah, so what do we do? Because now we got 4 goalies on the NHL roster, and Brossoit hasn't even practiced with the team yet. He had another procedure, I think, in early January. It was either December or early January that they went in and did it up again. And at this point, there's no rush because you've got 3 now on the NHL roster. So Soderblom's actually been pretty decent. They've got a young guy at Minnesota Duluth, Adam Guyon, who was the goalie for Czech that Connor Bedard undressed at the World Juniors. And then they got drafted by the same team. And that was a really awkward introductory presser question for the 2 kids. But Guyon's a freshman in college. Like, he's 5 years away. Comesso's probably another full AHL season from being ripe. So you go get Spencer Knight, and now the whole thing is flipped on end because Spencer Knight is a fairly well-developed, a 23-year-old with great pedigree and a pretty deep resume of international hockey and NHL hockey. And what you guys talked about, not protecting his starts. I mean, 48 hours after he got traded, he showed up and absolutely stoned the Los Angeles Kings. That was not an easy game last night.
I actually
should have been 5-1 at the end of 20 minutes.
I remember, and this is a Spencer Knight story. First of all, I'm a huge fan of Spencer Knight. I think it's going to be great for you guys. And I was at his NHL debut. He was 19 against Columbus. And I just remember it was a 56-game season. And I just remember, like, oh my gosh, so excited, right? And you just see, and our goaltending situation was kind of weird at that point. We had Chris Drieger, Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky was at the beginning of that contract. He wasn't doing too well. Drieger was unexpectedly good. I don't know how the hell we were able to do that, but Spencer Knight came in at the end of the year. I think he went like 4-0 or something like that, and he was excellent in every start. So then we go to the playoffs, and we're down 3-1 in the series.
I was yelling at Coach Q, get
Night in. And our goaltending was a train. When I tell you, we could not buy a save.
Like I'll just say it like this. We started with Bob in game 1, lost 6-5. We went to Drieger game 2. We lost 2-1. So we're like, okay, we got a couple saves. Drieger gets lit up. Like I think it was like 4 goals and like 18 shots. It was and we let Bob come back in for him.
And you could argue a better team in that series with Tampa.
Yes, and we come back in overtime and win that game. That was the Ryan Lomberg OT winner. Mm-hmm. And then we go to game 4, shellacked.
So then, game 5 comes. We're all in the building, right? And Spencer Knight's starting, and we're like, oh, this. And this guy, I remember the final couple minutes of that game. I think it might have been 2-1 or 3. It was 3-1. And he, like, slid across to Rob Kucherov. The East-West save. And he, like, stacked the pads almost, and everybody's going absolutely nuts. And then he makes another save on Maroon, I believe, who's on your team. He's a teammate of his now. And I just remember thinking, like, at 19 years old doing that.
And then played good.
And he played good game 6. I'm like, I was so excited. And obviously it's disappointing the way it ended up in Florida. But I think it's changed the scenery for both players.
Oh, yeah.
Is really needed. And they're at different positions, right? It's like Florida needs a top 4 right shot defenseman who's big and can play minutes, can move a puck. Seth Jones fits that bill. Chicago, clear thing they needed was a goaltender to help build around. So I also think and I want you to actually speak on this, like, does it kind of feel like it rejuvenates the locker room a bit, rejuvenates the fan base a bit?
Yes. I mean, you look at the last game Seth Jones played with the Blackhawks was in Vegas. They gave up 5 goals on like 12 shots in the first period. And they fought back and they lost 7-5. But that was the game after he made the comments in Utah about, we're the same team that we were on opening night. And those were the comments that ultimately kind of everyone in the league was like, oh, damn, he's like, he really wants out. He's gone. You don't say that in front of a camera and go back in the room with a straight face kind of a thing. So, like you've got some proud guys in that room. Like Nick Foligno wasn't thrilled. A lot of the guys weren't thrilled that he kind of put him on blast like that in the post game. And the fact that he was not a guy that spent a lot of time with the media after games in Chicago. And that's one of the things that, a lot of fans will bark about is that, like after the Winter Classic at Wrigley Field, which was an absolute train wreck of a performance by the Blackhawks.
Bedard answer the questions.
He was a no-show, and they made Bedard come out and take his spot with Murphy and Foligno. You got the guys wearing letters, and Seth is gone, and Bedard's got to come out and answer questions on his dad's birthday. So, I think with Spencer Knight coming to Chicago, you're right, Nick. Like, I think everything that I've seen from him, now granted, like no practice today because they've got 4 games in 6 days. But in the 24 hours or so that like morning skate and then pre and post, the dude's got swagger. The dude gets it. He's a proud American player. And like they had cameras on him during the anthem here in Chicago. And you could tell that he had a smile on his face. Like, hell yeah. Like I'm in Chicago during the anthem wearing this jersey. Like, let's go. And after the game, he chose his words very specifically, but it was like, Florida's a great place, but it's not the United Center in Chicago. Like when it's popping in Chicago, it's different. Right. And so like, I think he sees Chicago as his chance to get back into that. Like, who's the third goalie in the Olympics in 26? I think in his head, it's like, who are the goalies for the U.S. in the Olympics next year? Why the hell am I not on that list?
Yeah.
Four Nation, or, World Cup of Hockey in 28. I'm there. And he sees that, look, I know that there's this macro crap on the Blackhawks vibe right now with the media, and everybody wants to stir the Bedard versus the Blackhawks, and they're not doing anything to support him. And they've got no plan, and they're so far behind San Jose. Not true. But the reality is Connor Bedard is like a student of the game, and without making this a 2-hour podcast, the Blackhawks have taken their development camp in July off the ice, and they just have all of the prospects come in and do like team building stuff, like cooking classes together to work on their diet and work on, like, they have Johnny Oduya come in and teach them yoga and breathing techniques.
Oduya does yoga?
Boxing gym. Yeah, Oduya's, and the dude still looks like he could probably go skate 22 minutes.
We need Aaron Ekblad to get some yoga lessons with Johnny Oduya.
Never
I think
gonna
we
happen.
need a little bit more than that for Aaron Ekblad, Kirby.
Yeah.
But,
Open those pits up.
But all these kids get together every summer for like a week in Chicago, just team building. They're all good friends and talk to each other. So Connor Bedard is keeping tabs on the next generation of Blackhawks as much as he's playing in the National Hockey League. So Connor Bedard knows that Nick Lardis might be the first player to hit 70 goals in the OHL this season since John Tavares. And he knows that Sam Renzel is one of 5 Blackhawks prospects who are nominated for the Hobey Baker. And he knows that Oliver Moore just won back-to-back golds at the World Juniors. And he knew that Frank Nazar was coming. He knew that Landon Slaggert was coming. He's best friends with Kevin Korchinski, who I still think is going to be a legit like PP1 speed racer, left shot defenseman. And so he sees what's coming. And I think he has more patience than fans do because he's 19 years old and all these other kids are 19 and 20 and they're friends and he knows what's coming. Korchinski, Colton Dock, Ethan Del Mastro, and Nolan Allen were teammates when they won the gold for the World Juniors for Canada a couple years ago. Now you got Del Mastro giving you 20 minutes a night since Seth Jones got traded, and he's got a goal in 2 of the last 3 games. He plays the game the way that Connor Murphy does and Brent Seabrook used to. He's a road grader. I think Chicago's going to absolutely love the kid. So you start to see the young guys coming up, and you start to see little rays of hope. And I think Spencer Knight knows that, because Spencer Knight talks to guys on the Blackhawks. He played in the development program with Alex Vlasic for like 3 years. He's good friends with Landon Slaggert because they won gold at the World Juniors together and they trained together. So it's like he already knew 2 guys. He rode into the arena with Landon Slaggert. It's like, dude's been here for 2 months. You're sleeping on his couch. Whose couch is he sleeping on? But I think he's a 23-year-old goalie who's walking into a situation and he knows where the Blackhawks have been. He knows what it's like when they're there at the top, and he sees an opportunity to be part of the core that takes them back there. And I really got the sense that he's really, really excited about setting up roots and being part of that and having his jersey all over the place and his name attached to the Bedards and Nazars and Slaggerts in the future of the franchise as a guy that they build around and fans view as part of that core. Which really Corey Crawford never got the credit for that because he won 2. He should have won 3. He was better than Niemi in the preseason in 2009, but he was waiver exempt and Niemi wasn't.
The good old waiver exempt stuff.
But I really got the sense from Spencer yesterday that he is excited at the opportunity of being still 23 years old and walking into an organization that has a truckload of speed and skill coming. And in a year or 2, the Blackhawks are going to be really freaking dangerous and scary to watch, and he's along for the ride.
Yeah. Very, very positive outlook there, because I was going to ask Tab if he thinks Knight's going to be the catalyst of this, or this is going to be some growing pains, but I think I already have my answer, so I'm not even going to ask. Yeah. Gentlemen, anything else to ask Tab here before we wrap?
No, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate it. This was on short notice, but I do want to thank you. It's been a really good conversation, so we appreciate it.
Tab, where can everyone follow you, our viewers, and appreciate all the Blackhawks clicks on this video as well that you guys want to hear.
Absolutely. Twitter and Blue Sky and everywhere else, it's the one tab. And BleacherNation.com is where I do most of my writing. So, feel free to come by and watch the depression every night. Unless Spencer Knight keeps stopping 41 of 42 while his teammates put 18 on.
You're giving a lot of light at the end of the tunnel on this podcast episode. So be curious to see. We have our guy in our community, Vince there, Cody. That's huge prospect guy. So he'll love hearing this. Go ahead, Cody.
Yeah. And like, we ain't going to have no prospects in the future. We ain't got no picks in the first 3 rounds. We just give up another first round pick. We ain't got nothing coming up.
You know what, though? But here's the thing. Like, this is the lie that Pittsburgh keeps telling itself. You have a finite window. And they lied to themselves and they got away with it when Sidney Crosby dealt with his injury problems, and they were able to come all the way back and win a couple more, right? And part of that was because Crosby didn't want Taves to have 3 and him only have 1. Let's just be real, okay? The you have a finite window of time to make it happen. And I think Florida's ownership and management realizes, like the Blackhawks did, that you guys have got something that is incredibly special in your hands right now. And you've been to consecutive Stanley Cup finals. You've got a team that knows what it takes. It is worth coming back to earth at some point in 3, 5, 7 years and going through hell to live through the 5, 6 years of the best that you can possibly get. And I say that as someone who lived through 6 seasons of some of the best hockey you've ever seen with a team chock full of Hall of Famers like you guys have now. Please don't take Sasha Barkov for granted. He's been one of my favorite non-Blackhawks for a long time.
We are the Barkov truthers.
We are.
I'm a non-Florida resident Barkov truther.
There we go. He's our new resident Barkov truth. Nick, did you hear what he said there? There's going to be pain after, but you ain't going anywhere, Nick.
I'm staying right here in the bottom left corner right here. I'll be right here.
Man, I sat through freaking.
Yeah, I've been a lifelong Panther fan in Canada, Tab, over 30 years.
And I don't think we got to worry about that for a couple years.
But look, you go get Seth Jones because you want to stay there as long as you possibly can. And for all of his flaws, if you can pencil him in as a second pair defenseman for the next 3 years, you guys should be okay. And that's what the next 3 years are when you're going to go try and get at least one more cup. And that's what you play for. If you can get multiple championships at this point, you have done something incredibly special. And those guys in the room, that 2 Stanley Cup championships put Sasha Barkov in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, so that's what you play for. You play for the whole dang thing, and they've got the chance to go get it. So I wish you guys all the best with Seth. I hope he gives you better than he gave us. But you're putting him in a hell of a lot better situation than we gave him here in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, same thing with I could speak for all 3 of us and most Panther fans. We're gonna miss Spencer Knight. I mean, let's be real here. Like with him this season, he's been like a big bright spot for us this year because he kind of gave us like at least what we thought. We're like, okay, we have a transition plan with Bob. Now we have no idea, so that's gonna be interesting. But like once again, Spencer Knight's gonna be a hell of a goaltender for you. I think his greatest attribute, and Kirby could speak with, and these two could vouch for me on this. He's a big game goalie. And that is something that I did not want to give up. I'm not going to lie. I thought, but the craziest thing is I didn't think the overpay was Knight. I thought the overpay was the first round pick. But in terms of that, I mean, we're going to be fans of each other's teams for quite a bit here because.
No. We'll reconnect with the Blackhawks community definitely in the offseason here.
Are you telling me that Florida Panthers fans weren't fans of the Blackhawks when we gave you Thomas Kopetsky? And then Brian Campbell, and then Christopher Steve.
Oh, Soupy! I love Soupy. Soupy was my guy.
That was my favorite Aaron Ekblad version with Soupy.
Oh, Brian Campbell, and he was the best thing. He never missed a game for us. Kopetsky and for that, and Versteeg that 1 year in 2012.
Versteeg had one of the best first line hockey there with Fleischman and Weiss.
And then you gave us Damaged Goods and Dave Bolin, but
I don't forget that one.
It's right. I'll have to come back sometime and tell you about interviewing Aaron Ekblad when he was a rookie, and he called me in a Jeep with the top down on the way home from practice on a cell phone that was still registered in his dad's name. Because his old man's name showed up on my caller ID.
Hey. We could, that sounds like a good off-season podcast then. Yeah. But Tab, appreciated as always. Thank you again for joining us. Best of luck to the Blackhawks the rest of the year in this rebuild. Once again, thank you for doing this on such short notice. But Kirby, once again, I think we got a new sponsor. The first time sponsor with this podcast, right?
Yep, at JB Sells FLA. Again, that's FLA.com.
And right before, and as we say goodbye to Tab, we'll hear from a word from our sponsor, Canes.
Panthers fever is here. Are you geared up? CanesWear in Davie is the place for all your Florida Panthers needs. They have the latest gear for our favorite NHL team. Jerseys, polos, t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. CanesWear has you covered. Stop by their store in Davie or at PanthersWear.com. Again, that's PanthersWear, WEAR.com for all your Panthers gear.
All right. But boys, as we said goodbye to Tab, we had some pretty good Panthers news for us today.
Yep.
The Panthers re-signing Jesper Boqvist to a 2-year deal worth $1.5 million.
That's the number. I said I wanted it around. So again, like I said with the Forsling number, Nick and Cody, that's the number there.
Well, this means that Kirby gets to complain about Kevin Stenlund now again.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Well, everyone's like, how
this
could
is
you
what
not
this
keep
means.
Stenlund? Give me a break. I don't care if we go short a body. I still want Kevin Stenlund here. And you give him that extra third year and you bring the AAV down. So that was my part of this.
Listen, I'm just going to say this, Jesper Boqvist. I mean, for what he provides, I mean, it looks like he's a pretty good penalty. He's a good two-way bottom six player that could score 10, 15 goals, get you around 30 points, and can play in all situations. And I think fits our system really well. And you're going to need players like that, especially a team like what we're going to do over the next couple of years. We're just going to need to fill in these depth pieces, right? So whenever you're able to add somebody who's familiar, and he's now familiar with us, and keep him, like I don't think any of us when we
Zito sometimes filters those guys out.
Right, but it's like this is like a cheap guy that we could just keep in there. It's like already he's there. We don't have to worry about that. Boqvist is there. Whatever.
Good money with the cap going.
Right. And here's the other thing. By the way, I can't tell you how many times I've been listening to a bunch of podcasts this week. I've heard the cap going up joke all across the NHL, but it's true. And I think that when you take a look at a guy like Jesper Boqvist, I mean, I don't think when we signed him, I didn't really think anything of it, right? Like I thought maybe it's a guy that could start the year on the third line with Lundell and Luostarinen. We were thinking Mackey. But yeah, it's worked out really well. It's another nice signing by Zito. And it just continues to prove as we trade these draft picks, can he find buy low depth across the NHL? And he's proven it yet again.
Question at the forwards, I do on the D.
Yeah, correct. Well, you take a look at Nate Schmidt.
Bring in Seth Jones.
You take a look at Nate Schmidt. I mean, and Belinkus, they were bottom pair. I mean, Belinkus isn't playing it now.
Are you going to sink or are you going to swim come playoff time if you don't add to that back end?
But if it's a bottom pair, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
at least one of them.
And we'll talk about the deadline later this week.
I got to give my thoughts because I won't be here. So
go ahead.
Before we wrap here today, go ahead, Cody.
But I will be out of town this week, so I will not be here for the NHL Trade Deadline. I won't be on any spaces, so this is my only time to give my thoughts here.
You can't go anywhere on July 1st. You better be here for that.
I think July 1st I should be good. But it's funny is like with the Boqvist signing, the Panthers are really setting up here to really make one splash signing in this offseason because they got around $19 million in cap space right now. And you have to fill your top nine's good. You're basically missing a 4C and maybe another depth forward, I think, because besides having to re-sign Mackey, but that's pretty much a given. I'm not really too worried about that part. Because your top nine's all signed. So, and then you probably just need to go a splash edition, and it's probably going to be on the back end. So, and depending on what they do with Bennett and Ekblad, as of right now, I'm leaning to both being gone.
Mm-hmm. And there's been talk about, what is this? And the negotiating with Aaron Ekblad. Well, they could always throw, well, who are you going to replace me with? Well, that's what this trade does. It's like, you take a look and it's like,
whatever. And the one thing hurting the Bennett negotiations are the play of Anton Lundell because Lundell's $5 million. I mean, look what he's producing,
and he's producing like it, right? It's like on a 50-point pace. I mean, he's been really good.
Concerning this trade deadline, if I'm a betting man, this is where I'm thinking. I think we have 2 more trades in us. I think it's a backup goalie and a forward.
Yep.
Because from the feeling I get from Zito and Maurice, I think they are perfectly fine with the way our back end is currently constructed. Because I do believe, because Maurice has shown in the past, he has faith in Belinkus, he has faith in Schmidt. So I don't see them moving off of those 2 this year. I don't see it. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to go and get another forward because you have the cap space. Why the hell would you not use it? Because Kachuk's pretty much done for the year. We got to keep him out for the year to either have a backup goalie at this point. So I think we go out and get another forward. Which forward? I have zero clue. As of this recording, Yanni Gord has been activated from IR. That's a guy we're targeting. So, and he's playing as of this recording, he's playing in tonight's game versus Seattle.
Yeah, a lot of guys are sitting.
I want to say this for the record. Kirby and I were talking about this, but if anything happens, you could come back to this clip, and Kirby, it'd be pretty cool. I think personally, on the forward front, I tend to agree with you on the defense. I personally would like a Yoki Harju level, Brian Dumoulin level pickup. I don't think they will, but I'm telling you what I want.
Because if you put that out there, Nick, all our community is going to think they're going to do that.
Well, I don't think they're going to do that. I'm stating this is what I want.
Yep.
What I think, and this is just a gut feeling, I don't know anything. I want to state that as clear as I can. I kind of think that there is going to be more of a splash on the forward front. I talked to Kirby. I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me if it's a name we're not hearing, kind of similar to what Vegas did with Tomas Hertl last year. That
was a curveball.
Yeah, so I think it could be something. I'll throw some names out there. It could be one we're not talking about. A name I'm thinking about potentially, Brock Boeser. I know people are going to be like, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. I don't know. It's just a gut feeling. I could be completely wrong, but I just get the feeling that it's going to be a splash move. I don't think it might be a depth move.
So
now it could.
That I want. It's bigger than that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting a gut feeling, and I'm not saying it's maybe even majority, but I think it's around 50-50 right now. Of okay, I'm not like a couple of days ago I was sold, like okay, it's depth, and then as time goes on, there's talk out there or whatever, but I start just get a feeling that it could be a little bit of a bigger name that we're not talking about, or that is out there, and we're going to end up getting them. So that's just my bold take. That's my hot take there.
To me, I think we're in on Brandon Tanev. It's just he's a player that I think fits the Panther mold to a T. If we're going to be honest here, fast, physical, loves to be on the forecheck. Kind of like he kind of brings that energy that we don't have like Ryan Lomberg. And
I think Brandon Tanev becomes a fan favorite immediately.
Oh, quickly.
Immediately.
But if I were to keep my eyes on another name, and I'm just going to go off the wall here. I have no sources. I have nothing. It's just what I'm thinking. I'm not going to lie. I think Mike Curveball is going to be Jason Zucker.
I've been thinking about that, and I really like what he's done with Buffalo this year. I don't know. I mean, he's being held out of the lineup, I believe.
Because here's the thing. Here's why I don't agree.
A lot of players out of the lineup.
Yeah, because here's the one thing I don't really think about why I don't agree on Boeser is because I don't think Boeser is heavy enough to be on the middle six for us.
Right.
Because you got to be heavy.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be stiff.
Like you're saying 5-on-5 guy. Yeah. I think
Zucker,
our power play. Right?
And it might not be Boeser. I'm just saying I think it could be
Boeser come in.
I think it could be a more prominent name. Like Tanev, I would love. I think that's probably one of my top options personally.
If the Panthers thought like Tampa Bay or Toronto or Edmonton or some of these other teams, I would see Boeser being more of a fit because he's going to go on the power play and you're going to put him around, the McDavids and Matthews and Marners of the world. I don't know if Zito thinks like that, Coach.
Well, you said it's not his MO to just put somebody on LTIR and use the money, and here we are, right? So,
oh no, he's going to use the money.
Well, when we were talking about that, and I'd agreed at the time with you, Kirby, that it's not typically.
Well, you're thinking big names, so let's see all these big names being hit. When he moved Jones with the LTR money, Knight went the other way, Nick.
Right. Well, I'm just saying it's a gut feeling. It's a gut feeling, and I could be wrong. I'm 50-50 on it. I still think there's a decent chance that Tanev or a depth piece could come, but I think there's a 50-50 chance that it is something up his sleeve, and it's going to be bigger than we think.
You can't use Zito like Vegas. Zito is still to the dollar and cents. The Jesper Boqvist deal. Seth Jones coming in with some retention. I wanted more, but Knight going out on the 4.5. He's still conscious of the budget, Cody.
Yeah, there's $9 million.
Yeah, but he's still conscious.
It's actually more like 8. But
well, once you get rid of Drieger, that's $700,000. So basically,
big name. Then I'm not going to say I'm wrong because I'm not making a prediction here. But okay, then you're right. Bigger names coming in. But I think Seth Jones might be the biggest name.
Oh, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying because I think he was one of the biggest names on the trade block. I'm not saying it's Rantanen or anything level. I'm just saying I think it's
assets for that.
No, but I think it is a name we're not talking about. Something that is like, oh, okay, like
But even for Besser, like we're gonna have to give something up, and other teams aren't gonna outbid
Well,
that.
again,
It's
a gut feeling.
but
so I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. We know
I
that.
don't know what we would pay for him.
I just say what I'm feeling like, because the big name I don't think we're in on, because I think Zito rather use that extra first round pick and put it in his pocket, maybe save it for the next year's deadline, maybe for a move in the offseason. That's kind of all along the lines I'm thinking. I think we're gonna flip that fourth we got from Chicago for something else.
Yeah, I think that's why part.
And then there's obviously the
you got to
goaltending.
wonder why Mrazek wasn't in there with retention or something.
Because I don't think they like Mrazek.
Well, I mean, I mentioned on either After Dark or the Seth Jones live stream, both the San Jose goalies, and as of tonight's recording, March 4th, Vitek Vanacek's being held out. I want to state that I cannot stand
You
Vitek
always circle
Vanacek.
around on that name, Nick. You're like, what about you said that in the past on Spaces? I'm like,
I don't want to use the word hate. I just am not a fan of Vitek Vanacek. I didn't like him in
Washington. That was it.
I didn't like him in Washington. I didn't like him in New Jersey. I don't care what the stats. He was winning, whatever. I am not a fan of that. I would prefer Georgiev over Vitek Vanacek.
I'm just gonna let me just say the names.
Vimelka, please.
All right, Karel Vimelka for backup goalie. I like. If you want Dan Vladar.
Yep.
I agree. Those are the names I want.
Those are the two goalie names.
Lion.
I guess Lion, but I don't know if Detroit is going to move him because Detroit's kind of using a tandem type deal. We'll see. And unlike Calgary, Detroit doesn't have that Dustin Wolf to really keep going past that, but we'll see.
Connor Ingram might be more in the offseason, but maybe an eye.
Ingram could make sense this year. I like Ingram. But in the forward front, I like Brandon Tanev. I wish we got Trent Frederick, but I don't think Boston was ever going to trade him in division, especially to us.
That's an off-season target of mine if he doesn't re-sign at Edmonton. So.
He's not going to. They can't do it.
Don't anyone write the blurb articles on that because Nick will be livid at me.
And I don't know. I'll see whatever because I don't have a crystal ball. And to be honest with you, I can't think of everyone that's on the damn trade block right now. So, but with that and all, anything else, boys?
Oh, I'm good here. We'll miss you, Coach.
Yes, but for everybody listening, join us live on our YouTube channel March 7th at noon Eastern. We're going to be joined by Caesar, Vincent Scheib, and Nick Fairbanks. We call him Banksy. I'm really looking forward to it, and we'll see what happens over the course of the week. So, Cody, we're going to miss you, but just make sure to check us out and appreciate it.
Yep. Unfortunately, I'm sad I can't be there, but I'll be in Nashville watching hopefully Connor Bedard and Spencer Knight. So we'll see. But if anyone, as always, please like and subscribe. Give us 5 stars on Spotify. We love those ratings. Remember, follow us, all of us on Twitter. Twitter handles are in our names currently. Remember, every Saturday night, Captain Rats After Dark. Always check us out then. Once again, trade deadline March 7th at noon Eastern. Follow, and I think, as always, let's go Cats.
What's up, Cats and Rats fans? If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button before you head out. If you're listening to us on Apple and Spotify, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. And just like always, let's go Cats.